Hey everybody, if you've spent any time at all shopping for properties in Puerto Rico, you've probably seen a great many listings where it says not subject to appraisal, or in Spanish, no sujeto a tasación. Well, let's be honest, people say lots of things in listings. Newly renovated, maybe in the 90s. And obviously people want what they want for their properties, right? The sellers are going to say, like, I don't care what an appraiser says, this is how much I want. Well, this video is to explain what the options, if you're coming in with financing, what the options really are for you as a buyer, and also some tips of how you can negotiate and get an appraisal contingency so that your earnest money deposit is protected. All right, so let's jump in. So let's say that you want to purchase a property and you want to use financing to buy it, right? You want to use a mortgage to make that purchase. Well, whatever that property is that you want to buy is going to have to be appraised, because that's the lender's way of figuring out how much is the property actually worth, right? Regardless of what the asking price is from the sellers, right? Because some sellers, they think that, they're sentimental about their property. They have their asking price way up here. The question is, if you want to purchase it with a mortgage, what's it actually going to appraise at? Okay. So best case scenario is that the sellers are asking this much for it, and then the appraiser goes out and says, yep, that's how much it's actually worth. So it appraises for the full value and hopefully doesn't need any repairs. That's the best case scenario. We proceed, right? A full steam ahead, and we try to get it to close. But sometimes it doesn't appraise for the full value, right? When it doesn't appraise for the full value, that's called an appraisal gap, okay? And then as a buyer, you have a couple of different options, or you could have options. What it really depends on is, what does it say in your purchase contract, right? That agreement that you would have signed before ordering the appraisal, you're going to sign a contract. You're going to say how much you're willing to pay them for it. You're going to say in there, how many days do you have to close? How much is your earnest money deposit going to be, right? That's the money that you're going to give them to not take any more offers while you work on getting this thing closed. And so keep in mind here, if it doesn't appraise for the full value, what do you want to happen? Do you want to just walk away and they can keep your couple $1,000s of a deposit? Probably not, right? But obviously, if you're not using a real estate agent, right? If you're not using a buyer's agent, if you didn't have an attorney look over your contract, if you just kind of like went along with whatever the seller said on the contract, the best thing for the sellers is that it's not subject to appraisal. They don't care what an appraiser says, and that they get to keep your full deposit if it doesn't appraise, and then bye-bye, we're going to take other offers, right? So obviously that's going to be the best thing for the sellers, but definitely not the best thing for you as a buyer. So I would strongly recommend that you get in your purchase agreement what's called an appraisal contingency, because if it doesn't appraise on value, there are actually several different options, even if they've said that it's not subject to appraisal, okay, in the listing. Because what are those options? It's a spectrum, really, okay? So there's everything from, on one end, that you as the buyer will bring the full cash difference in order to get the deal to close, which means that you're going to come out of pocket, you're going to bring more cash to the closing table to make up whatever that appraisal gap is to get it to close. That's one option. On the other side of the spectrum, the other option is, if so long as you've got it in your purchase agreement, that you will be able to renegotiate the purchase price if it appraises low, right? Because it's possible that you can renegotiate the price, and if there's a gap, that the sellers come all the way down to where it appraised at, and then you're able to continue, okay? Also, if there's repairs that are needed, that's another conversation. Who's going to pay for those repairs? Okay, is the seller going to pay for those repairs so that we can get the deal done, or do they not have any funds? They don't have any motivation to fix things, to give it to you, right? So that's something else that you should consider when you're going through the contract negotiation process. But then the other option is kind of a hybrid option in the middle, where what if the sellers come down halfway and you come in with a little bit more cash in order to get it to close? That's kind of the middle option. So here's an advanced pro tip, right? This is something that you can get built into your contract if you want to, is that let's say that the sellers are not going to be willing to budge on the price, right? That they don't care what the appraisal says. They want that full value. Well, that's fine, but you could protect yourself, because what is the amount of money that you as the buyer would be comfortable bringing in order to, extra money? If it appraises low, how much extra money would you be willing to bring in order to get the deal to close? $2,000, $5,000, 8,000, 10,000, 20, 30, what's the amount of money that if you like the property that much, even if it appraises low, okay, well, I've got my down payment, I've got my closing costs, and I'll bring a little bit, this much extra to get the deal to close. Even if the property is not subject to appraisal, you could get it written into your contract that if it appraises for whatever that value you're comfortable bringing, let's say that it appraises $5,000 less, okay? That if it's a difference, if it's an appraisal gap of $5,000, I'll bring the $5,000 to get it to close, okay? But if it's more than $5,000, I want to walk away and I want to keep my deposit, okay? That would still be kind of like a hybrid appraisal contingency, because that's you saying even before the appraisal, okay, I'll bring $5,000 extra dollars, but if it appraises less than that, if there's a bigger gap than that, I'm not willing to bring 10 or 20 or 15 whatever $1,000 to get the deal to close, and I want to take my deposit with me. Okay. There's other questions there about like, where is that deposit sitting, right? Did you put it in a third-party escrow account, or did you just write a check and give it to the sellers and now they've got the money already in their bank account? Okay. Be careful with where you put that earnest money deposit. That's a topic for a different video. But this is kind of like a really good hybrid option, so that, okay, if they're really hard-nosed, they don't want to come down on the price no matter what the appraisal says, well, how much would you bring to the table to get it done? And if it's less than that, how would you be able to walk away and still keep your deposit? So an advanced pro tip while you're doing the contract negotiation is, let's say that the seller is going to be super hard-nosed. They're not going to be willing to come down and renegotiate the purchase price, meet you in the middle, none of those things. They're going to stick with their price. Well, that's fine, but there's a hybrid kind of appraisal contingency that we can put in there potentially, right? If you can get this negotiated to say, think about what's the amount of money that you would bring if it comes in low, if the appraisal comes in low. Is it $1,000? Would you bring an extra $1,000 to get the deal to close? Do you like the property that much? $2,000? $5,000? 8, 10, 15, 20? How much money would it be worth to you as the buyer to get the deal to close, even if the appraisal comes in light, right? Once you have that value in mind, would the seller be willing to put it in writing that, okay, let's say that the magic number for you as the buyer is $5,000, okay? That means that if it appraises between, $1 or $5,000 light, that you'll bring whatever that difference is, you'll bring that to the closing table to get the deal to close, okay? But more than $5,000, you're not going to be willing to bring more than $5,000, okay? Then what you can do is put into the contract this kind of a threshold appraisal contingency that says just that. If it appraises for $5,000 or less, right, lower than the asking price, then you will be able to bring the extra funds. But if it appraises more than $5,000 light, then you want to be able to walk away and keep your full deposit, okay? Because that's what's on the line. Remember, you've given somebody a deposit, and we're hoping that it appraises on value. Because remember, best case scenario, it appraises on value, no repairs needed, we proceed, we're good to go. But if it doesn't appraise on value, what happens to your deposit? Do you get to walk away and keep the whole thing? Do you only keep half of the deposit? So this like threshold appraisal contingency is to kind of be like a stopgap measure that, okay, if $5,000 is what if it comes in that light, I'll bring an extra $5,000 or whatever the number is for you that you're comfortable with bringing, right? Because essentially that's you paying more than the property is said to be worth, okay? But if it's worth it, there's a lot of properties that it might be worth that. So think about it, get that number in your mind during the contract negotiation period, and see if you can get it in writing, this threshold appraisal contingency, so that if it appraises less than that value, you're good to go. You'll bring that difference and you'll be able to close. But if it appraises more than that difference, like it just appraised super low for some reason, that you can still walk away and keep your deposit. The last thing that I'll encourage you to think about while you're trying to get an appraisal contingency negotiated into your purchase agreement or into your contract is that just be aware that asking for an appraisal contingency, it can weaken your offer, right? Because imagine that if you're sitting from the seller's perspective and somebody comes to them and says, if you're asking for a full appraisal contingency, meaning if it even appraises $1 less than what they're asking, that you get to walk away and keep your full deposit, right? That's the full contingency versus the full other side of the spectrum, where they say, whatever it appraises for, even if it's way lower, $30,000 lower, I'll bring the full $30,000 to get it to close. So whichever, obviously that's a much stronger offer, that you're agreeing to their not subject to appraisal thing, and that if it appraises light, you're going to bring that full difference. But if you're saying that if it does appraise light, you're going to want to renegotiate, maybe meet in the middle, or have them come all the way down, well, that's going to be a weaker offer. So just keep that in mind as you're discussing appraisal contingencies, that it does weaken your offer in the eyes of the seller, okay? And then the other thing to consider is the depth of your pockets, right? Do you have the funds to actually bring that difference? Keep in mind, if it's an investment property, you're not allowed to receive a gift of funds. And even if it's your primary home or second home and you can use a gift of funds, like let's say that you don't have the money, you're going to ask mom or dad or a family member or friend for those funds to get the deal to close, that gift is going to have to be sourced, right? It's going to have to be documented. It can't just be money or cash that you've got under the mattress or in a safety deposit box. So just think about, like, do you really have those funds available? If there is an appraisal gap, where would those funds come from? This is the last thing that I'll encourage you to think about. So there you go, guys. That's everything I think folks need to know about the appraisal process, what to do if it appraises low, what to try to get into your contract as far as the appraisal contingency, and then that threshold contingency if there's a huge appraisal gap, and what you can do about it. But make sure you're getting it in writing in that contract. And if you're about to go under contract, if you're concerned about the language that's in a contract, or you just want some help with how to get that language to happen, what to say, and all those kinds of things, let me know. Be happy to help you with that. My contact information is going to be in the description of this video. But anyway, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.